Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone, for giving up a valuable hour to come and think about your career with me. I'm Joanna Gaudoin from Inside Out Image. I'll tell you a bit more about myself in a minute. But just a few bits and pieces. I would love you to interact with me as much as possible in this hour. It's not about me talking at you. I am here to give you some valuable content and ideas, but please do contribute because often you have ideas that are good to share with other people. So you can comment in the chat. We're also going to be running some polls. I think there are 3 in today's session. Just to reassure you, they are completely anonymous. So we will all see the results of them together, but I can't then see in the back end what you ticked for each poll. So please do answer that freely. There's a Q&A box for questions. I will take those as we go if I can, if it's appropriate to do that without delaying the session too much. But rest assured that if I don't answer them during the night, we'll certainly get to them at the end. And I will also give you my email address. So if there's something you don't feel comfortable to ask or it's a bit more complex, then you can always send me an email or contact me on LinkedIn. So thank you for joining. We are now in February, and if you had any New Year's resolutions, are they still lasting? I would say often by now there's a few that have dropped off, and January is certainly full of new goals, new start, but by February all of that has waned a little bit. But what I want to encourage you to do today is not to let thinking about your career wane, because it is absolutely essential that you do give it proactive thought, rather than it just being about when it comes to review time with your line manager, or perhaps when there's a crisis point, i.e. Potential redundancy or something's going really wrong at work. The ideal is that you're continually thinking about your career and making some plans. And what I want to talk you through today is how you can try and do that in an organised, sensible way that doesn't take up too much time. So it is about tangible advice and tips today. And I've written a couple of articles the last 2 months that might help you as follow-ups as well. So I wrote one last month about being career fit. So January is often about exercise, losing weight, all those sorts of goals. Well, being career fit as well. And then there's another one this month that follows up with some small steps you can be taking. I think I focus on 5 in that article. So very much a focus at the moment, because it's really important to me that I try and help people to manage these things more proactively. I work with a lot of individual clients, and very often they come to me when they've got a point of pain, rather than there being more proactive planning. And it is often better if you can try and think about things. You can't anticipate everything, but to try and give your career some thought and some time so that you can end up where you want to, let's say. So many of you may know me already, but I'm Joanna Gaudoin. I have run Inside Out Image for a decade this year, so I am very much hoping we get out of lockdown and I can actually do something to celebrate, because I was working out that it's almost a year since I quit my corporate life. I used to work in marketing and consultancy, and then I spent a few months contracting, working out what to do with a career transition coach before starting my business in the autumn of 2011. My focus is working with financial and professional services people, not exclusively, but that's my heartland of work. And I do one-to-one work, as I mentioned a minute ago, so helping middle to senior level people for the most part overcome their career barriers. At the other end of the scale, I speak at events, and in the middle, I run workshops and masterclasses for corporate organisations, helping their people to develop the skills they need that are beyond the technical. So that's what I'm all about, helping people develop the non-technical skills they need to progress in their careers for their own benefit and for the benefit of the company, organisation or firm that they work for. So a bit of an intro to me there. So what do I want to tackle with you today? Firstly, I want to look at why you need to actively manage your career, because fundamentally, if you don't see that it matters, you will do absolutely nothing about it. It's like losing weight, getting fit. unless actually we really understand and we feel motivated by the reason to do it, we're probably not going to bother. So that's my first goal today. And the second one is to help you get started or to pick up from wherever you are. Maybe pre-lockdown, pre-COVID, you were great at this, and with homeschooling and all the other challenges, it's fallen by the wayside, or perhaps it's something you've never ever done. So I want to give you practical advice today to help you take action, because fundamentally, if you don't do anything as a result of coming to this webinar, you have wasted your time. So I really want to help you with that. And it's about making these sorts of steps a new habit. So gentle steps at a time, behavior change, because if it's something you haven't done before, so helping you come up with a realistic way forward. So I'd like to start with a poll, and this is to ask you why you have joined today. So just to give me an idea of where you're at. If the answer that's in your head isn't showing up in front of you, then feel free to share it in the chat. You can share things in the chat with just me, and if you send it to just me as a message, I promise not to share your name, so feel free to do that. So you've got some spare time and interested in the topic. You're fairly happy with your career overall, but always open to additional help. Thirdly, feeling a bit lost or in a rut regarding your career. Or lastly, you really need to make some changes ASAP. And that could be because you are just really unhappy, or maybe sadly, unfortunately, there's stuff going on at work, redundancies, and you know you're going to need to go elsewhere. So just a few more seconds to let the, we've had a lot more people join, which is great. So about another 10 or so people could vote, just 5 more seconds to do that. Great, I'm going to end the polling and I will share the results with you. So, oh, very polarized today. That's interesting. So 46% of you are feeling lost and in a rut. Thank you. That's not uncommon, and I hope today will help to show you a bit of the map you can pick up and take to move forward. And second one, fairly happy but open to additional help, and that's a good place to be. We can all be learning things all the time and improving, so even if you just make some copious notes and bring them in later in the session and later in the year, then that's worth doing, because sometimes what we're taking on board isn't for putting into practice right now, but perhaps later on. And some people saying that they need to make changes ASAP. So 18% of you saying that. So a couple of comments. Someone saying they're a uni student and starting to think about a young age. I would really agree with that. If you can start getting into good habits of thinking about your career, that's very helpful. Someone saying they don't see the results. That could be if you're on a mobile, because I think they don't always show on there. Hopefully everybody else can see them. I feel that because of my location outside London, I'm not considered for roles, or also, although I know my capabilities, but don't blow my own trumpet. Thank you very much for that. I won't say your name, but it is a lady that's commented on that. Dare I say, without wishing to be generalist, sexist, women do generally struggle with shouting about what they do a bit more, their capabilities. And if you want to talk to me a bit more about that, then I can help you or point you in the direction of some articles I've written on that topic. The outside of London one's an interesting one. Maybe that gap will close with COVID. I think that's something yet to be seen. And someone else early on in their career want to start thinking of next steps. Great. Planning is always good. So thank you very much for sharing there. So I wanted to start by looking at this picture of a cake and thinking about an analogy for our careers here. So I want to think about this cake in 2 parts. So the sponge of a cake, typically you do need to follow the recipe, don't you? You know, if you get the flour, butter, sugar, eggs out of balance, the cake's probably not going to work out too well. So there's a very precise recipe for the cake. But the topping is a bit more of a free-for-all. It's a bit more of a mixture. So there's generally a list of things that are good on cakes. So icing, buttercream, chocolate, fruit. You can see an example in front of you. And I would compare that more to your career. So it's not about having an exact recipe, but it's having a list of things that you consider and think about, and probably consider at different times. There are going to be different points that are valuable. So clearly on a cake, we're probably not going to start putting things like vegetables or meat. It's the sort of list I was talking about before. So there is a list, but it's more variable than the actual sponge. So in thinking about your career, it's thinking about the different elements you might need to consider, even if it's not considering all those elements at any one particular point. It's an evolution, it's a journey with time of the different ones you need to bring in. Analogy that's also helpful, I think, is having a toolbox. So it's thinking about what are the tools I need in my career, the skills, when do I need to bring them in? And by having a plan and considerations, that will help you do that in a lot more efficient way, in fact. So thinking about, well, at this point, maybe I don't need to be focusing on my networking, but I know in 6 months' time that's something I want to bring in. So which tools and skills do you need to have in your toolbox ready? And then when do you need to actually bring them into your plan? So career management. Now, I'm not saying good things, positive things can't happen if you don't have a fixed plan. My career is very much like that, if I'm honest. I never thought I'd run my own business. Even if you'd said to me 10 years ago, just as I was leaving my corporate job, that I'd run my own business, I would not have believed you, even at that point. I genuinely did not know what I was going to do next when I worked with the career transition coach, but I no way thought it'd be my own business. I thought it'd be a different corporate role. So I'm not ruling out that good, positive things can't happen just on their own, but actually your chances of directing your career, particularly if you're on a very specific career path. So I work with a lot of lawyers, finance people, and people that are happy in those areas, and that's more of a fixed path. They do need to think ahead to be able to navigate around to where they're going and what they want to do. Otherwise, the danger is you sort of meander and you can get pushed around depending on your organisation or other factors around you if you haven't given it enough consideration. So I'm working with a client at the moment who actually works in a law firm. She's not a lawyer, she's in one of the functions. And she followed her boss there. He came and headhunted her into that role. And she quite likes her role. You know, obviously it's nice that her boss thought enough of her to come back for her, that sort of thing. But the issue is now she's got stuck. She's in a rut because she's got a good relationship with her boss, but he doesn't really look to help her develop or move on. He trusts her immensely, and clearly it's not in his interest to try and help her go elsewhere. So one of the reasons she's working with me on is confidence to try and move on, to look at her skill set, to look at how she builds relationships with other people, how she considers other opportunities elsewhere. So she is a good example of someone that's not really thought about her career too much. Doesn't mean she's in a bad place, but she's just ended up now not in the place she wants to be. So it is worth considering. When you think about your career, it gives you focus, you know what you need to work on, and you can direct a bit more where you go. And a key thing to have in mind is your career is your responsibility. I sometimes hear from people, not too often, but oh, well, I just have to see what HR say, or oh, I'll wait on my line manager. No, 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 no. That they need to know how they can support you, what you're looking to do, and it's a partnership working with them. And hopefully, a good manager will ask you about your future career prospects and what you're thinking, but not all of them do. So it is down to you to think about what it is you want and what it is you need to do to get there. When you spend time thinking about your career, and I mean really thinking about it, and that might mean taking time out away from your desk, going to a different place for inspiration. I don't want to sound too airy fairy, but you know, if you go and sit in the park for a bit, get some outside stimulus, maybe not right now when it's -2 or whatever it is outside, but try and go somewhere else and really think about your career in a bit more depth than just sitting down at your computer. You can start to think about the gaps you need to work on for where you want to go, where you want to go, where that actually is. You can make sure you start thinking about having the right conversations with the right people. I sometimes have clients come to me and we start talking about, well, you need to have a conversation with your line manager. And when they actually do that, the line manager's totally shocked because they never thought they had any aspiration for going anywhere else. And that's because they just haven't had the right conversations. It doesn't mean you're talking to your line manager about your career every 2 minutes, but you're just gradually building up those conversations over time, exploring what might be next, and trying to explore that with your line manager too, and involving them, as long as, of course, that's a trusted relationship. Apparently someone's hearing some noise. Let me just double check that everybody is muted. I think everybody should be. Maybe it's my microphone moving around. Sam, let me try and hold that still and see if that works. Maybe I'm moving a bit too much against it. So, right conversations and the right people. When you work on your career, you also feel more motivated. So you feel like you've got a plan and you want to move forward. When it all feels a bit vague, that's quite difficult. It's difficult to be motivated when you don't really know what you're focusing on. So they are all really important reasons to spend on your career, and in fact, outcomes as well. And remember, it isn't always about the next step up. Very often, it can be about a lateral move, and that could be a lateral move to another organization. So, to get some different experience, perhaps in a slightly different organization, depending on what you do. Thank you, Sam. Glad it's better. Um, or it could be a move within your organization to another function, to experience something else, to be able to get to another place. So don't always put pressure on yourself that it's about a promotion. And I'll come back to that a bit more in a minute. So I have a client of mine at the moment, and it started out, she just wanted to work on her LinkedIn profile and her personal brand, just to make sure that was looking a bit more professional, particularly as LinkedIn is a real shop window for us all, even more now with COVID, because even internally, new colleagues join our organization, they're more likely to go to LinkedIn and check you out before they see you in a meeting, because there's not the same way of getting introduced to people in person. So this particular client wanted to work on those two aspects, and we've been doing that. And she had a view to, in a couple of years, she might change to another function, probably within her existing organization. She'd done that before. But for now, no real plans. As it happens, a role has come up in a different function that she really wants. So she sent the words to me on Monday. Really glad we've worked on my LinkedIn profile. The internal recruiter has already been looking at it. So it's worth thinking ahead and thinking about what you need to plan for. And it might not necessarily be a promotion, it could be a side step. 3 things I really want you to keep in mind that are real principles to guide your career management. The first one is time. You need to make time for this. And I know that's really difficult. We're all busy at the moment. I think even if some of us, if we weren't homeschooling, had more time in lockdown one, what has happened with COVID is we've got so used to being at home that we filled all the time. And I certainly worry now about if I was going to go back and needing to travel to meetings, how would I have time? So time is a struggle. I'm not going to say this is easy, but you do need to put aside specific time for your career. I'd suggest to start off with, you put a bigger slot. So say if you haven't done anything on this topic before, after this webinar, you go and book straight away in your diary an hour, hour and a half to start working on what we're going to talk about in a minute. And then after that, regular slots, whatever works for you. Is it half an hour a week? Is it 2 slots of half an hour a week? Is it once a month, a longer slot? Whatever you think is realistic. I would suggest you make it more regular, and then if you miss one, it's not the biggest deal. Okay, so if you've got, say, half an hour in a week, it's more likely to happen maybe 2 or 3 weeks out of 4 than it would if there was nothing in your diary. Whereas if you've only got it in once a month, you don't have time, you don't get to it, then it's a whole other month before you get to it again. So think about planning, because if you don't put it in your diary, trust me, it won't happen. The equivalent for me is business development and marketing. So also I do work with a marketing lady, and she's certainly going to chase me up if I haven't done what I'm meant to have done. At the same time, if I don't put it in my diary, the time is going to get filled with client delivery and other important meetings. So do put time by. The second one, top right, is do think about small steps over time, incremental steps. If you have some enormous number of actions you're challenging yourself to take in the next week, you really won't take them. So make a plan that's realistic and think about step by step. Thirdly, think about reviewing your plan regularly. So how well is it working for you? What changes do you need to make? I'd certainly recommend you do this once every 3 months as a minimum. You might do it a bit more frequently depending on where you're at. If it helps you, I act as accountability for my clients on lots of things, but if you're working on this on your own, then maybe you can get a close colleague or even a friend to check in and see how you're doing, if that's going to help you stay on track. So remember those 3 principles when you're working on your career. So I'd like to now know a little bit from you. Sorry, I didn't close the sharing results on the last one. Hopefully you could close them. On this poll, I'd like to know how much time you're spending on your career planning and development at the moment. So no time at all. Now and then when there's a pressing need, around review time, assigned time at regular intervals, or something else. So just give you a few seconds to look at that, and I'm just going to check a question. Yes, someone has asked about articles or videos on how to set up a stellar LinkedIn profile. I have an article that outlines I can't remember, it's 7 or 8 now, key areas of LinkedIn profile to get right. So hopefully that would give you a good start. My plan is probably next month to write a few more articles and resources on LinkedIn. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll also get that. But if you can look for that on my website, insideoutimage.co.uk, or if you send me an email at the end, I will send you a link to the LinkedIn article that will help you. Right, I am going to end the polling in 5 seconds. So I think there's another 15, 16 people who could vote if they wanted to. Thank you. So let's share those results. So I am not surprised to see that the majority is only when there's a pressing need. So clearly something has happened. Maybe it's a change you didn't expect. Maybe you've got a new line manager. Maybe there's some other change going on. And review time as well is the obvious one. Pleased to see that very few people is no time at all. I guess by the nature of people who've come on this, you're maybe more open to working on your career. Pleased to see that 15% are assigning some regular time. So I would really love it. I'm not going to ask you again at the end of this session, but I'd really like that 15% to increase by the end. So you're all trying to diarise time to work on your career. So thank you very much for sharing that. That's just another question. So let me just check what that is. Yes, someone's got to drop off. There will be the recording shared by We Are the City, so that should be coming to your email address that you registered with. Someone has asked, do I work with individuals based in ROI? I guess you mean Ireland by that. Sorry if I've not got that right. Yes, I do. I work with individuals globally, especially since COVID. I mean, I've long had clients in quite a few in Switzerland, funnily enough. I've worked with someone in Tokyo recently, so Ireland is not a problem at all. Answered that one. Great. Share my email address. Yes, I will do. Thank you for that question. Share my email address and follow-up resources. I will. And I will put a couple of things in the chat at the end. My email address I'll try and put, and a particular link I'm going to share with you. But then if I've talked about something else, like the LinkedIn article that you particularly want, you can email me and ask for it. Great. Thank you for your questions. So The next thought is, where on earth are you now? So that is your starting point, because that's where we all need to start from. Where am I now before I can think about where I want to be? And at this point, I want to put up this image to help you think about what is next for you. Where do you want to go? So if we think about the left-hand turn-off lane, see this is US traffic lights here, that is if you are thinking about you want to go to another organization. So you want a change, and that could be a change within your area, or it could be a completely different career change, a bit like I made a decade ago. If that is something you want to talk about, I have got a colleague that I work very closely with who does career transition coaching. So if you want help for a massive change, she is definitely a good person to go to, and do email me if you want her details. So that is, of course, one option. And I think during COVID and lockdown, a lot of people have thought a bit more about, do I really want to be doing what I currently do? So that is definitely an option. On the right hand side, there's the lateral move, probably within your company, to the right. So thinking about, well, I need to go to a different area of the business to get some more experience. So one of my clients at the moment, she works within finance within a software company, but finance is very subdivided. So she's thinking about which other functional areas, even within finance, she needs to focus on to broaden her experience to then make a step up. And then, of course, there's the promotional aspect. So is it very simple for you and it is about a step up, and hopefully that's doable within your current organization, although for some, of course, that might mean a change of organization. So thinking through what really is next for you and which of these you might want to take as a direction. Also important to think about what you really want from your next role, not just in terms of actually the core of the role. What do you want to be doing? Do you want to be managing people? Do you want yeah, all of those factors to consider is really important. When I work with clients on getting a new role, one of the things we look at as well as CV and LinkedIn is job search strategy. Because if you think about what you really want and your criteria, then that helps you to focus on applying for the right roles and saying yes to the right thing. So I've got a client at the moment. He voluntarily quit his job because it didn't really work for various reasons, and he had several different avenues. One avenue was go back into what he'd done before, but for a different firm, and then he's been considering other avenues. And a very important aspect of that has been thinking about the criteria for each of those avenues, and then for the individual job roles that have come up within those. So do some thinking. You know, going for a new role is not just about who wants you, it's what do you want, and that will help you focus as to what's next. So a couple of things in the chat that I'm just going to pick up on before I move on. Someone telling us helpfully that LinkedIn are giving access to the top 15 courses which people completed before being promoted. I think I saw an advert for that. Yes, you can access that without a premium account, sometimes on the trial. So that could be useful if that's a good option for you. Premium account, I'd agree, not really worth it either. And I probably use LinkedIn more than most people because I use it as a BD tool as well. So I would agree. I don't think for most people it's worth investing in. So thank you very much for that input. The link, do you mean the link for the LinkedIn courses? Someone's asking for there, to just the panelists, if that's what you're asking for, if you could just clarify. But I think you should be able to find them. I don't have it because it's someone else that's talked about that. So if the person that's helpfully talked about the LinkedIn courses has a link to share, then please do feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, perhaps Google it afterwards. I think I've seen an advert for it, so it might also be on LinkedIn more generically. So you've thought about the broad step of what's next. Now we need to get into the more granular next steps. And the first thing to do here, I would suggest, is identify your gaps. So what is the gap to get to the thing you've identified you want to do next, whether it's moving function, whether it's getting a promotion, whether it's moving organization. So this is about going and gathering insights. So insights about yourself, thinking about what are my strengths, what am I using now, what do I want to use in the future, what are my technical skill gaps for doing what I want to do next. So if I want to change functions, do I need to focus on thinking about my skills that are transferable and how I talk about those, even if I don't have specific technical skills that I might need in that role? How do I prove I'm a quick learner so that I can pick them up? What about soft skills? Are there soft skills I need to develop more or focus on in my conversations with other people to help me make that leap? And then it's about the how. And this is where you start to talk to people, engage with others, get their input. I call it exploration. So try not to put anyone too much on the spot of what you want from them, but just trying to have gentle conversations. So if there are other people in the company you work for that are quite influential, for instance, and could have an impact on whether you could change function, trying to start building some relationships with those and getting to know people a bit more. If you've got a mentor, that person can be great for pointing out who you should really know. And I'll come back to that a bit more later on. But who can give you the input you need? So this is an information gathering stage at this point to help you close the gap and ultimately to come up with a plan to help you move forward. So when we come on to the plan, you need to think about what's really going to help you. So in doing your exploring, talking to people, is it getting a mentor if you don't have one? Is it taking a training course? So the person that helpfully recommended the LinkedIn training courses, is it one of those free courses? Is it paying for a course? Is it paying for another qualification? I've heard of a few people recently that are using the opportunity to do a part-time course of some type alongside what they're already doing because they're fortunate enough to have a bit more time. Is it working with an expert like me or someone else to help you move forward? What are the specific actions that need to go into your plan? And what is the timeline that sits against them? A couple of key things to mention at this point. Think about your network. How can your network help you with this process? So the client I referred to a few minutes ago who was looking at 4 or 5 different avenues, a key part of the plan we made for him was identifying who in his network could be helpful and how he could start to go out and approach them and have a conversation to direct his thinking. So really thinking about who in your network is helpful. Of course, that assumes you've got a network. And if you haven't got a network, I highly recommend you start to build one as soon as you can. For the people that said they're just at university, they're quite junior, definitely start that now because it becomes a great habit to connect with people. And it is true, the cliche, you can't build a network the minute you need one. So some solid thinking around that and how you're going to do that is key. And of course, a good LinkedIn profile is helpful for doing that, because even if you're not starting your network on LinkedIn, you meet people elsewhere, you should be connecting with them on there so that it's a little bit like your address book online to stay in touch with people. I'd also recommend you probably need at this stage a strategic relationships plan. And what I mean by that is thinking about who you really need to know to help you progress against the goals you've got in your plan. So for example, how you might set this up and what I work with my clients on is building a spreadsheet, very simple, where in the first column, you've got some objectives. And they're not about the objectives of your job, your role. There could be some crossover, but not necessarily. So they might be things like find out more about X function to ultimately decide if that's a move you might want to make. So that could be an example objective. Another objective could be build my exposure within the organisation, so more people know me. That's a very good objective. If you're just starting out with this, you probably only want 2 or 3 because you don't want to be overwhelmed. You want to make some solid moves forward. So a couple of objectives. Then the next column in your spreadsheet is thinking about who could help me with that. Who can help me find out more about that function? Who is it I need to know in the organisation? So imagine at that point you could end up with feasibly 5 or 6 names against each objective. So have a think about those, put them, you've got several rows per objective, put those people down. The next stage is to traffic light them. So that means really looking and thinking about the status of the relationship you have with those people at that time. So green would be someone that you know well and you can easily tap into talking to them. It's not about establishing a relationship, the relationship's already there. Amber could be someone that they know you a bit, you know them, but it's re-establishing. So it could be a former boss, whether they're still in your organization or not, someone you've known before, and it's about picking that relationship up. And red is someone they don't really know you, you don't think, and you don't know them. It might even be a job title, you don't know the name. So the first action is going to be finding out who that person is. So once you've got your traffic lighting, it's then prioritising, because you don't want to have 15 people in your plan. That is not going to work. So you probably want to start with 4 or 5 as a maximum if you're starting on this afresh. And then make a plan about how you're going to connect with these people. So are there other people that could introduce you? Does your mentor know one of them really well? Can he or she introduce you to that person? Or can you say they suggested? What is it? Are you in a similar committee together? Are you on the committee for a networking group in your company, for example? So trying to look for connections. But if there's really nothing, there is no harm in just saying to someone, I'd really like to understand more about your career or your part of the business. Have you got 20 minutes for a virtual coffee? It's very rare people won't make time to share their knowledge. When they're less likely to make time is if you're ambiguous about what you want to talk about and they feel there's a burden falling on them. So building a strategic relationships plan of who can help you with your objectives and your career plan is a really good place to start. A poll now that I want to ask you before we move on to just some key skills to think about. So, and then I will check the questions as well, because I think there's a few comments and questions coming in. So I'd like to ask you what your biggest barrier is to working on your career. So is it time? You don't know where to start? It feels too hard to get the help you need, or something else? Let me just check the questions and comments. I do have a colleague with career changes and transition. I have a generic idea where I want to move to, but different background, currently working corporates. That is exactly the sort of situation she can help you with. So she helps people that really have no idea through to have a bit of an idea and need to hone it. So it definitely can be narrowed down. So she does some psychometrics, but she also does a lot of coaching with you to tease out what it is you want to do. So I'm very happy to put you in touch with her. If you send me an email, it's probably best, and I can either direct you to her website or give you her email address. Interestingly as well, I will tell you at the end, hopefully I shall remember and have time, about a session I'm running with my colleague, that colleague I was just mentioning about the career transition coaching, on Clubhouse tomorrow, the new social media app. So we are running something called the Career Couch tomorrow at 4 p.m. to take questions on your career. So you're very welcome to come and talk to us in there and get a feel for what she's like there as well, if that's something that interests you. If you're not on Clubhouse yet, I do still have some spare invitations. It's in beta mode, so you need an invitation to get in. So I think you'd need to send me your mobile number for that. Someone's kindly shared the link for the LinkedIn courses, so thank you for that. Sorry, the microphone got noisy again, apologies. Someone's saying they feel overwhelmed with the options of where your career could go, but also feel like they don't align with your aspirations. That sounds like that needs some in-depth thinking. I'd be very happy to talk to you, or my colleague probably would be as well, if that's something you want to do. So thank you for voting. 39% of you don't know where to start, so I hope today's going to help you. 18% too hard to get the help you need. So start slowly. It's not necessarily about working with someone like me. It could be about reading some articles, getting some books, or asking colleagues, friends for book and article recommendations, looking at some courses. So just having a look around and take some gentle steps. Time is, of course, a barrier, and then a few of you have said other. So if you want to comment on what that other is in the results, then do feel free to share that there. I think probably a couple of people, the comments were in relation to that a minute ago. Thank you very much. So I want to give you some other considerations to help you think about things. And the first element I want to mention, and some of you may have heard of this, particularly if you know me already and have read some of my blogs, is the pie theory of career success. It's not mine, it's by somebody called Coleman and is from the 1990s, but I still think it's really relevant. And it links what I was saying a minute ago to having good relationships at work. And thinking about the other aspects that we don't always consider day to day. So pie theory, pie stands for, not a nice pie like we see in front of us, unfortunately, but performance, image, and exposure. So would anyone like to hazard a guess as to which of those they think is most important for career success and what percentage it accounts for? So anyone be brave in the chat. Thank you. Someone's commented from the poll, identify gaps but no opportunities to address them in my organisation. At least that door is closed, is what I'd say, and it makes it clear that you need to think of other options. If you want to talk more about that, very happy to do that. So exposure. Someone raised a hand. So if that wasn't a mistake and you want to talk, please do. If you want to unmute yourself, I think you should be able to and speak, you can, or if you want to put it in the chat to me, you're very welcome to. The person that's given their mobile number for the career couch, can I please ask you to email it to me at the end, because the chat might get lost because there's a lot more comments to come and I can't currently paste it somewhere else. So I'm very happy to send you an invitation for Clubhouse if you can just make sure you email me. Thank you. No problem on the mistaken raised hand. Yes, exposure. Most of you are saying that the people that have been brave and commented. Yes, exposure is 60%. So 60% is exposure, image is 30%, and performance is just 10%. So why do you think performance is so low? Why is performance so low, do you think? I'm willing to be brave. Not at this point, it seems. So you've all been very interactive so far, but can't be seen by all. Exactly. People can't. We're involved in our stuff because we're involved in it. Doesn't mean everyone else is going to see it. And if people don't know who we are, they probably don't know what we're doing. So if you think about the scenario, let's take the one of being promoted within your organisation. Say it works in the way that your line manager puts you forward to senior management for promotion. The first thought they're going to have is, do I know this person? You know, have I heard this name before? And assuming the answer is yes, in what context? What do I think about this person? Have I met them in a meeting? All those sorts of human thoughts go through their mind. There's an assumption that people perform well. Firstly, because if their line manager's putting them forward, then it's their reputation. Why would they put someone forward that's not very good? And also, despite most organisations having performance issues at times, most senior leaders believe we employ good people. So that is why performance counts less. It's a given, it's expected. So it is about raising your profile. And someone gave a helpful tip that actually on LinkedIn, it is worth trying to raise your profile with people there. So think about having a good profile, but also how do you raise your visibility? And if someone you want to be exposed a bit more to is active on LinkedIn, interacting with their posts can be a really good way of doing that. So thank you very much for the contributions there. Another way of looking at it is thinking about your touch points with other people. So where do others encounter you in your career? Where are they building a picture of you? So in the old days, and hopefully in some time to come, face-to-face meetings, on the phone, via emails. Do they Google you? Are they looking you up on LinkedIn? How do you come across in video calls? On messaging? So thinking about both internally and externally, what are the touch points that you have with people in your career, and making sure you represent yourself well, you have a good personal impact in those, and consistent. Of course, personal brand is something to consider. I'm not sure if you've all heard of personal brand before, but that is essentially being clear what you stand for and people having a clear image of you. And if you want to read more about that, I've got some articles on that too. Before we finish up, I just want to talk through my 9 skills, and some of you may have seen before a webinar I've run that's for We Are the City, in fact, on these 9 skills and why they matter. So I think that webinar will still be in the library somewhere, but I do want to walk through them on this webinar for those that haven't heard me talk about them before. And at the end, I will give you a link that you can have a short email series come into your inbox with a link to a free e-booklet that talks through each of these skills, and there's a page per skill, so you can think about each one a little bit more, as I'm just going to touch on them very briefly here. So I'm going to go left to right, top to bottom, so you can follow with me. So top left is personal impact. So thinking about in your career, how do you come across in different scenarios? So those touch points we just talked about. Because we don't work in a vacuum, we work with other people. So whatever you're trying to progress on your career plan, it's going to involve other people at some stage. So thinking about how you're using your appearance, your body language and your voice and your behaviours and different scenarios to communicate yourself and, importantly, engage with other people. Top middle, often neglected skill, is one I've talked about a lot already, so I'm not going to stay on it too long, is thinking about other strategic relationships, often with senior people you need to be building within your organisation. So I've run a couple of sessions on office politics this week, one for a law firm and another one yesterday for a construction consultancy. And on both occasions, people had most challenges with senior stakeholders politically, and that's often because they haven't built a relationship with them, they don't know them, they don't know about their agendas. Likewise, those senior people don't know anything about them, so often that creates more politics. So do think about aligning with pie theory as well. Who do you need to know? Top right is office politics itself. How do you navigate it positively? You are always going to get office politics where you get people with different assumptions, values, beliefs, and motivations. So that's pretty much everywhere. What matters is whether it's negative or positive. Thinking about how you navigate that and the skills to get around that. So I run a diagnostic with individuals and also in the small groups workshops, so people can understand what their profile is. It's not a personality test. It's about how you are reacting to your environment, how you could be being perceived, and the things to work on, things to do more of, things to do less of. So really important to think about that, because we always think other people are political because we don't understand their assumptions and the basis on which they're working, and they think we're political very often for the same reason. And I've worked with a lot of clients on this topic, and I am at the moment. It's often weaved into other things like building a strategic relationships plan and thinking about their personal brand. But I certainly had a client I worked with last year, and she was promoted from amongst her peers to be their manager. You can imagine the politics that generated. So we did a lot of work to make sure she could overcome that. And now she's leading a really strong team that is growing, and they're all working together really well. So it's about foreseeing things, but also turning around difficult situations. The middle one on the far left is about building client and prospect relationships. So this won't be relevant for everybody, but if your responsibility is managing clients, keeping them loyal, retaining them, making sure you're winning as much of their work as possible, being able to cross-sell within your organization perhaps. So for instance, if you're an accountant and you're already doing their tax, what else can you be doing for them, for example? So making sure you've got the skills to work with both existing clients and to bring in prospective clients and to win those, because particularly in service businesses, it is the people that make the difference. As I said earlier, a lot of technical skills are expected, particularly if you work for a big name firm. So if you're in a services business, it is about how you service those clients. The middle one is a little bit different, but often neglected. People don't think about getting feedback and using it to move forward and develop. So thinking about how you take on board perhaps negative feedback you've had. And negative feedback, we all think of it as negative, but actually really it's a positive. We can only move forward if we get constructive, dare I say, negative feedback. So thinking about how often are you getting this? How often are you putting it into practice? What you've learned, the feedback you've had. Are there things you need to do to close the gaps with the feedback you've had? So it's not a simple change you can make. You've got to do some development work, making sure you're really clear on what somebody means by the feedback that they offer you. And one of the sessions I developed during lockdown spoke actually for a law firm that I'm now offering more widely, is how to get constructive feedback and use it well, and also how to give it as well, because we all need feedback to improve and move forward. Middle right is all around managing a team. So just because people are good at their day job, it does not mean as they become more senior and get promoted that they're great at managing people. It's a totally different skill set. And unless people do have it and as an innate skill, they've had a great manager before, so a great role model, or they've had some support and development in that area, they're unlikely to be good at managing a team. So thinking about if it's something you're already doing but feeling like you're a bit missing in some of the skills there, or it's something you need to be doing in the future, thinking about how you can close that gap, how you can develop, because it is a totally different ball game. And as you become more senior, that you're more than likely going to have to manage people. So thinking about what's required for that. Bottom left is meeting effectiveness. We all spend hours in meetings, but how good are you at participating in meetings, running meetings, and linked to that, presenting? If you avoid presenting or you're not good at it, it can really hold back your career. So thinking about what it is you need to be doing to move that forward. I've been working with an accountancy firm partner. I started out working with her on presenting because in her previous firm, although she was a partner, she never had to present. Then she moved firms and she had to present both internally to share with the rest of the firm the sorts of things she was working on, share knowledge for cross-selling opportunities, and present marketing seminars externally. So that's something I started working with her on, and we've also done some other work around business development and personal brand as well. The middle bottom one, I could talk to you for 2 hours about networking. I mentioned it earlier, but do be thinking about what's your networking strategy? Who do you need to know? Networking is not just for people that have a business development responsibility. Your network is really key to your own career success. Who do you need to rely on in your career? What does that look like? Where do you need to go to meet the people you need? And last but not least is being new role ready. So many clients approach me and say, oh, I've had this headhunter come to me, but my CV is 5 years out of date. Oh, what can I do? Can I do this in a day? Well, yes, you can, but you're probably not going to do a great job of it. So it's much better if you could keep your CV a bit up to date, your LinkedIn profile. I've mentioned LinkedIn today already, but make sure that's in good shape so that you're ready for opportunities. You might not want a new role now, but things can change. So make sure you're prepared for that scenario as far as you can be. Not being prepared is one of the biggest reasons people don't go for new opportunities and get stuck in a rut. So be thinking about what you might need to do in that area. So I hope that gives you lots of food for thought of the potential things that you need to focus on. I'm now going to wrap up, and I do want you to think about what is next for you. What do you need to do? Who do you need to speak to? What time do you need to diarise? So really spend some time, hopefully this afternoon, even if it's just half an hour, acting on what you've heard this lunchtime, or if you're listening to this at a later date, whenever you listen to it. If I was in the room with you, you would have come in and found a postcard on your seat, and that wouldn't just be a nice piece of marketing from me with my details on. It would have some space on it for you to note the couple of actions you're going to take as a result of what you've heard today. So do think about where you can write those actions down to make sure they get done. So please do put any questions you've got in the Q&A. I shall check both the Q&A and the chat in a minute. 3 options to help you further. If you would like the short email series and the e-booklet on the 9 skills, I just talked about them briefly, there's a web address there. I'll also put it in the chat for you. There is on my website as well a version for people who manage and develop people to help you think about the skills they need. So you'll see that under the resources section of my website. There's also some webinars there. There's of course my blog. Do connect with me on LinkedIn. Please say you were on this webinar, because I get lots of random requests and I'm not accepting them all at the moment because there's just so many. So please do flag up you're on the webinar and you'd like to connect. And if you've got a career challenge or something you'd like to discuss, you've got a more in-depth question, my email address is at the bottom. I will try and put it in the chat in a minute as well. So please be putting your questions and comments into the question area and chat, and I'll just bring up the chat. There's a couple more comments. Clients can be changed into stakeholders. Yes, that too. Very good point. So there is, oh, I've sent it all to all panelists. Sorry, let me send it to everybody. Here is the link for the 9 skills. Here is my email address if you need my help. Just make sure I type that correctly. And if you give me a moment, I will just try and go and find the LinkedIn article for you, because that might be helpful just to share on here. Fact, I'm going to share a variety of things with you here. There's a page, I'm going to share a URL that gives you various articles about LinkedIn. And there's one in particular, Love Your LinkedIn Profile. It's aimed towards people looking for a new role, but it focuses on the areas you should be working on your LinkedIn profile. So hopefully that will help you. And there's a couple more there about why LinkedIn matters, but I'm probably going to write more about LinkedIn next month. So if you sign up for the Career Success booklet on the 9 skills, you will also get my monthly emails, and next month is probably going to be on LinkedIn. But if you don't want these email series for the 9 skills, you just want my newsletters, drop me a line and let me know. So let me just go over to the Q&A, and I'm going to stop sharing. Right, there we go. And answer your questions. You can't narrow down the options in which area you would like to work. I probably need to talk to you more. Whether you want a bigger career change, potentially that might be something my colleague Ali can help you with, but very happy to talk to you if you want to discuss that offline. Do drop me an email. Talked about the exposure. Yes, exposure does feel like taking a risk and requires more confidence, and can sometimes feel a really difficult thing to do if you're not used to doing it. So definitely small steps. Start with people that you feel like are easier to build up these regular connections with, as that will help your confidence. I haven't updated my CV since I started my role 9 years ago. Every time I try to start, I get stuck and don't know where to begin. Any suggestions? It depends whether you're open to help or not. I don't just tweak people's CV typically. It might be a service I offer in the future, but I get people to download their career to me. I've got a client actually in an hour's time that we're continuing that process. People download their career to me and I write it from scratch, because what we find is that gets a very different result to you just trying to think about what on earth you've done and type it. It's more like people telling me a story of their career and I pull out the right skills. So it depends whether you're open to help. If you are, I can talk to you more about the services I offer in that area. Otherwise, it's just trying to walk through yourself and think about, what did I really do in that job? It's not, oh, you've been in your role for 9 years. So actually thinking through, what are the key milestones perhaps that I've come across in that role? What have I really achieved? Maybe starting from there, achievements first and working backwards. So hopefully that helps you. How to work in another country that requires a sponsorship after COVID-19 is over. How to navigate during such high unemployment. Not quite sure what you mean by sponsorship, and is that within your same company? I'm going to give you quite a generic answer here that might not be right. So if it's not right, please email me again and tell me a bit more context. But I'd say, thinking about who do you know in that other country, you don't say whether it's within your current company. I'm thinking probably not, because you mentioned unemployment, but who do you know in that country? Do you know anybody or anyone that's connected to it that can help you with some contacts? I would start with contacts rather than recruitment companies. I'm saying that quite broadly at the moment, as sadly for recruiters, a lot of companies aren't going that route at the moment, although hopefully that will come back. Someone have to go. Great, glad that was helpful. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to check the chat. You're very welcome. I hope that was useful. Please do get in contact with me, even if it's in 2 weeks' time or 2 years' time. If you've got a question that comes up, I'm always happy to help. I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of the clients I'm currently working with, she first saw me speak at her company 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now. So I really don't mind when you contact me with questions anytime. So thank you very much for joining today, and all the best for the year ahead, and stay COVID free. Thank you.